In the year 1996, a small company named Game Freak, in collaboration with Nintendo, released a monster collecting game titled Pokemon for the Game Boy. And it blew up like crazy! Pokemon was everywhere, and everyone was playing it. There were Pokemon anime, Pokemon games, Pokemon trading card game, Pokemon trading card game. There were movies, lunchboxes, and plushies, and so much merch you wouldn't even believe it. If you were a kid in the late 90s, there was no escaping Pokemon. Now, nearly 30 years later, it's the best-selling franchise of all time. Even today, it's impossible to escape Pokemon's influence. Now, when something is popular, there will always be those who want to cash in on its popularity. Ever since Pokemon's inception, many people have tried to imitate its success. Since 1996, there's been Digimon, Neopets, Yokai Watch, Temten, Koromon, Nexomon, Monster Sanctuary, Monster Rancher, Monster Hunter Stories, Cassette Beats, Battle Gem Ponies, and of course, who could forget scanners, where you literally scan barcodes to get monsters. I'm not making that one up.
Just in, alien monsters from a distant galaxy have landed on Earth and are hiding in real barcodes on real products everywhere.
Scanners time! Let's go get them!
All these Pokemon-likes make up a genre called monster taming games, or monster tamers. A game where you collect a variety of monsters and use them to fight other monsters. Fun fact, Pokemon was not the first of this genre. The actual first was Megami Tensei, which came out in 1987, and I'm sure I mispronounced that Japanese-ass name. Now, do you think any of the games I mentioned are just imitating Pokemon? I would argue not. For each of these games I mentioned, well, obviously influenced by Pokemon, have their own unique monster designs and gameplay mechanics. Digimon has a clear, distinct visual style. Monster Hunter Stories monsters are based off its own monster designs from the mainline game, and Yokai Watch are clearly inspired by Japanese folklore. I don't think you'll find too many monsters in these games that look identical to Pokemon. Now, fast forward to January 2024, where there's a new monster tamer in town that's been getting a lot of attention. Palworld. Palworld, often described as Pokemon with guns, but the game is actually more like Pokemon meets the survival crafting genre, like Ark. And in 8 hours had over 1 million downloads. It's blowing up Steam charts, it's all over TikTok, and it's completely taken over my Twitter, X feed. And the problem with Palworld compared to every other monster tamer is that it's an uninspired, asset-ripping cash grab of a game. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad game, mind you, but when I first looked at the actual gameplay footage, I instantly noticed that... Oh, wait a second. Is that a shiny Eevee? The world looks a lot like Unreal default assets. And wait, is that literally that same font from Breath of the Wild? That menu looks awfully a lot like Ark. And when I noticed all of these things meshed together like a bad Chinese bootleg, I had to take a closer look at the company's other games. So the team behind Palworld is called Pocket Pair, whose most recent game is another crafting survival game called Craftopia, which is in early access, and wait a fucking second, that scene is literally the opening shot for Breath of the Wild. Alright, what else they made? Well, they're currently making a game called Nevergrave, and it's, wow. That's definitely Hollow Knight, isn't it? Well, that makes Strike 3 and the final nail in the coffin for me. Pocket Pair just clearly rips off other games and tries to make it their own.
Hold it!
They're not ripping it off, they're just inspired by it. After all, Digimon and all those other monster tamers aren't rip-offs. But there's a line between inspiration and ripping something off, and to be honest, sometimes that line is blurred. What some people say is a rip-off, some others may say is just inspiration. So, what makes inspiration different from imitation? Intention. What are the devs' intentions in making this game? Are they looking at another game, feeling a spark deep down inside of them, and taking that spark to do something truly creative? Or are they looking at another game, get cash in their eyes, and see nothing but profit? Well, at an immediate first glance at Palworld, I assume the latter. They're very obviously just cashing in on two very popular genres, mashing them together since the survival crafting genre is easy to make, relatively speaking, shoving it into early access and hiding behind that label to shield themselves from any criticism. They're using Unreal assets and not making the world themselves? Early access. The animations are basic and incomplete! Early access. The game is super buggy and unfinished. Early access. It's very clear to me these Palmons aren't created from inspiration, but of imitation. Here's the difference between inspiration and imitation, and I'll use Breath of the Wild as an example. Here is inspiration, and here is imitation. And don't just take my word on it for when it comes to inspiration. Take the CEO's word. I've always loved Nintendo games, and that hasn't changed. I also deeply respect them. However, when it comes to making games, Nintendo has a strong philosophy of creating new and unique games with high quality, and this was questioned at the Nintendo Game Seminar. On the other hand, I have a deep-rooted desire for my work to be enjoyed by as many people as possible, and to that end, if there are good ideas in the world, I pick them up, and I don't necessarily have to be particular about originality. I think it would be a good idea to create things in a way that just jumps on what is trendy. Lol. Well, it's clear the CEO isn't in the business for their passion, love for gaming, or the artistry, but just the love of cash. But this cashing in on trends isn't the only problem here. Another issue is the CEO's questionable stance on AI art, and that is what has me, and many others, feathers rustled the most. Although, I don't actually have feathers, I just have fur. Let's take a look at another one of Pocket Pair's games, AI Art Imposter. This game is, and I quote from Steam, an AI drawing party game for 3 to 8 players. You are a progressive artist who commands AI to generate images, and you don't need aesthetic talent to draw good artwork. Well, that's not good. Fun fact, this game makes the publisher's 3rd game to be in early access. Does the dev plan on finishing any of these games? Anyway, that AI art game is just a goofy game, right? We can excuse it? Well, the CEO is on record to confirm that they use generative AI for development. Now, what does that mean? Well, it could mean anything. But what it could mean is that Palworld uses generative AI to come up with totally not Pokemon designs, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. On top of this, the CEO posted pictures of fake mod designs generated by AI on his Twitter. I mean X. No, wait, I mean Twitter, since it was Twitter back then. Or is that considered using a dead name? Anyway, while there is no smoking gun on this AI accusation, the evidence is certainly pointing that way. I mean, look at all these pals compared to Pokemon. Sure, some of these examples might be a bit of a stretch. Some might even be wholly original. But some of these are blatant imitations, and thus the line is blurred once again. Are these pals using Pokemon as inspiration, or is this a pale imitation of the real thing? Well, it turns out it might be more than just imitations. Take a look at these 3D models. The Boltmane pal, which was taken straight from in-game files, have the exact same proportions as this Luxray that was taken straight from Scarlet and Violet. Now, according to a recent article from the Video Game Chronicle, you cannot in any way accidentally get the same proportions on multiple models from another game without ripping the models. Or at the very least, tracing them meticulously first. One senior character artist told VGC anonymously, the wireframe meshes look different, so they're not the same models. But it's so close that they may have built over the top of the Pokemon models and made a few changes so they weren't exactly the same, said a different artist. So, yeah, they basically took these models and made them visually appear different enough so they can claim that it's their own creations. On top of this, the bones of these models, which are used for animation, are also extraordinarily and very suspiciously similar to Pokemon models. Now, obviously, again, this is kind of speculation, but when taking all the evidence, it's not looking good. Pocket Pair has previous games that are blatantly copying other famous and popular IPs. One of those games using AI art as a primary gameplay loop. The CEO confirmed that they use AI in their dev work, and Palworld's pals look suspiciously similar to many Pokemon, to the point where their 3D model proportions and some meshes are the exact same. These are the pieces to the puzzle, so I ask you, do they fit? Do you think Palworld uses generative AI to make their PAL designs? Do you think they stole Pokemon models, transformed them, and made them their own? Maybe, maybe not. but the company behind it all is definitely shady. After all, if it looks like a Lycanroc, it barks like a Lycanroc, then it's a dire howl. I'd also like to point out, as this video is being written, there's constantly new facts about Palworld being discovered, so this video might be outdated by the time it's out. Who knows? If you bought Palworld, played it, and didn't know any of this, it's okay. I don't hate you. This video isn't meant to target you or anyone. This video is merely meant to inform you. And I do not condone of death threats, which, funnily enough, is happening on both sides of the table. I do find it strange how tribal people seem to be getting around anything about Pokemon or Pokemon adjacent, including IGN, which straight up allowed for targeted harassment? Okay, IGN. Some people are quick to attack or defend either side, and honestly, it's kind of weird. It is just a video game. But I do think buying games from a company that makes AR games that leeches off the success of others and quite possibly steals assets from other companies is wrong. By buying their games, you are supporting these things. I do want to say that if Palworld nor its developer did not have any of this suspicious activity, I would be all for it. An open world game that you can play with your friends and has cute monsters to collect sounds awesome, but I can't in good conscience play it. A lot of people will also take the opportunity to say that they want Palworld to succeed because Game Freak and Pokemon are terrible, which I think is the wrong way to go about it. Now, I will admit, I like Pokemon. After all, I was that target audience for when it came out in America in '98. I even had that Blastoise backpack. Therefore, I can't say I'm not biased, but no one can ever truly be unbiased. And while I do like Pokemon, I'm not afraid to give it criticism when it deserves it, especially recently. So yeah, I do agree with many Pokemon haters that Game Freak needs to step it up, and that it needs competition. But do you really believe that Palworld should be the game to latch onto? Listen, I've kept my eye out on Monster Tamers, and I'd say it's best to play something else. The genre has no shortage of great games. Do you want a Monster Tamer that's part Metroidvania? Play Monster Sanctuary. Do you like My Little Pony and miss the 32-bit Pokemon games? Play Battle Gym Ponies. Do you want to fuse two monsters together and see what happens? Play Cassette Beasts. Do you want to play an open world survival game with crafting and monsters? Then just go fucking play Pokemon Arceus.